Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Primrose Bima. I hold a PhD in political studies, a master's in international relations, and an honors in gender and transformation. My channel is dedicated to discussing content about academics, career, and adulting. And I think the topic I'm discussing today is cross-cutting and is of course a personal matter. I am sharing this video because I've come across a lot of people who are very curious as to how one can become a lecturer or how one can get lecturing opportunities. I do have a video that I created about how to get academic jobs, so see that link below also if you just want to have a general idea around how to get jobs in academia, whether as a tutor, as a teaching assistant, and of course as a lecturer. This particular episode is dedicated to me speaking from my experience, going in depth and being honest about how I actually came to be the lecturer that I am today. So just for the record, I am an ad hoc lecturer, which means that I work on a temporary basis. I do not have a full position or a contract which says that I'm going to be a lecturer until I decide to resign from a particular university or upon retirement. So I am in a position of precarity, and I do understand that this video may not be helpful, at least towards people that are seeking full tenure track positions. However, I am on that path, right? I definitely want to be a full-time lecturer. I want a full-time gig, which is why I am dedicating my time to working on this on an ad hoc basis, because that's what has been provided to me at the moment. But just as in me individually, right? I grew up, I think at first I thought I was going to be a businesswoman because I kept saying to people, I hear a lot about businessmen, but what is, the space for women? And I thought I was going to be a businesswoman, right? This was me up until the age of 12. And then I discovered that I was very good at writing. I loved my history. I loved my English literature. And so I wanted to join those people that were creating this historical knowledge, the political analysis, and I also wanted to write creatively and from an African standpoint. So I think in terms of paving the pathway to who I am, I was developing the relevant skills and the relevant interest in politics, in history, in society, and the passion for writing without actually labeling myself as someone that wanted to be a lecturer. And of course, all these realizations were accompanied by my interest in wanting to one day have a PhD. So I knew from the age of 15 to say that one day I'm going to graduate as Dr. Primrose Bima. And in as much as I didn't know the financial costs, the emotional burden, as well as the time that was required for one to become a doctoral candidate or to one day become a doctor of philosophy, it was something that was committed. That's something that I was committed to from a very young age. And even when planning what I was going to do after high school, I had that idea to say that by the time I at least reach my 28th birthday, I would have a PhD or at least be working towards one. Hence, me having a PhD by the age of 30. So in terms of connecting the dots, really nothing was up here in my mind. I definitely knew that I didn't want to teach. Main reason being, I'm surrounded by a lot of teachers where I come from. I have got relatives who are teachers in preschool, teachers in primary school, teachers in high school, and I do have some who are lecturers. My father himself is now an academic. So, and I was like, I know how those people struggle, right? They work so hard, and I know that most of those people don't earn a lot. And I wanted to be rich. I wanted to be a businesswoman after all, right? Even though I didn't know what kind of business I wanted to get into. However, I remember I have fond memories of my childhood, whereby myself and my sister, who's now a school teacher, we used to play with pebbles, right? Stones, put them in groups, cluster them, and create a school. And when I had access to dolls, would actually sit those toys around, teach to them, and just being an instructor and a teacher. But I think by and large it was a matter of socialization because I grew up around very instructive adults, right? They were teachers. So I used to attend my dad's lectures and I used to attend church as well. And so I think Me playing like that was a matter of mimicking. However, I have seen how that sort of shaped the individual that I became later on in life. I was a very laid back and they call people introverted, right? Although I am quite loquacious, I speak a lot. But I was a very laid back and introverted person in my high school years. Despite that, I was a very good writer. I used to write stories, circulate them around the dormitory, around different hostels and different classes. Um, but I never merged this writing with speaking, right, with public address. It was only later towards my exit years of high school where we had to be involved in creativity projects, where I joined a poetry club, where I then also took the initiative of creating a United Nations association because I felt that a lot of people didn't know much about the world and what was happening around them. A lot of people didn't know the connections between the countries we were based in and the rest of the world. So it was then that I was like, I think I can be Secretary General of the United Nations. I'm so interested in politics. I'm so into development agenda, and I would love to speak um, to delegations of different nations. I want to be a diplomat because I think it's important, and I think that diplomats have money, not like teachers, right? Okay. So I started working towards that by me joining the University of Cape Town to study international relations and public administration, which I then fused with gender studies because I've always been about promoting gender justice. Varsity was a very difficult space for me. All the concepts were so difficult. I struggled with theories. I merely touched on them because I wanted to pass exams, and I scraped through a lot of concepts in undergraduate because in my undergraduate years because they were just so difficult. And I was like, I won't need all these theories if I make it to the UN anyway, right? So I was never a very thorough reader, but also it came with just not having the linguistic capacity to comprehend particular concepts. And I always felt like, getting higher marks was not in my place. I was getting very good marks though in my gender studies assignments, and I didn't need to try too hard. And I always found a way to link back my analysis in international relations to political studies, to policy making, to gender transformation. So by the time that I did my honors in gender and transformation, I knew that my focus was going to be at development initiatives and also about the position of women in African policy making spaces as well as in international relations. I really didn't know a lot of people that had done that, so I really struggled to get relevant supervision, which meant that all the research that I've done to date was not necessarily aligned with the goals I had, right? So I did a master's in international relations, and my dissertation ended up being on South Africa's migration management policies towards Zimbabwe, which of course had a foreign relations or intergovernment relations aspect to it, which qualified me for a master's in international relations, but there was nothing in there that was in depth about gender. So I did try to explain how oftentimes women, particularly who are not as educated or from particular classes, are often excluded in migration policies and considerations. So and then I moved on to a PhD where I was like, okay, I think if I look at conflict resolution, I can find a way of including women, peace, and security. But the danger in it was that narrow focus was not going to work for an 80,000 PhD thesis, 80,000 word PhD thesis. And so I ended up looking at the Southern African Development Community, SADC's, responses to electoral conflicts or electoral crises in its member states. And I didn't even have room to explore much of what I wanted to say. And because it was PhD level, I then could not run away from the theories that I had for long sidelined. Now, what was helpful was PhD was the opportunity for me to work under the supervision of an expert who was very kind in that my supervisor spoke to me about theories, referred me to writings, literature that further unlocked my mind. And although I grappled with that aspect of my thesis for the longest time, by the time that I had to complete my thesis, it was very good and thorough than I would ever imagine. Um, but let's go back to lecturing. So, when you're in the academic space, oftentimes there's opportunities for people to tutor. And to be quite honest, the first time I tutored, it was just for that little money. The money is not a lot, but it was better than nothing, especially if you're not getting pocket money, right? And even if you are, right, it's a little extra, it makes your bank balance a bit better. So got into tutoring, joined my peers who were also tutoring, and I didn't think much about it. I was very passionate about speaking to students about concepts and helping them with their assignments because it's something I would have also appreciated during my time as a student. And then after my honors, I then went to my master's. During my master's, it was a very tough time. I completed a 2-year program in 1 year, so I sidelined tutoring for a bit. And because it's not something that I was invested in, I didn't go out there to think about lecturing. Fast forward to when I started my PhD, I was working in a Ministry of Foreign Affairs while pursuing my PhD thesis because, of course, my journey was supposed to lead me to the United Nations. And I wanted a PhD since I was 15, right? Achieving my childhood goals. However, when I realized that I could not strike a balance between these two and that I needed to go back into the academic space, I needed a source of income. So there we go, money again. And I was like, I can teach. I'm good at speaking. And I will also benefit from being a teaching assistant because I had an offer. Actually, I had two offers from a politics lecturer and a gender lecturer who wanted me to be their teaching assistant for courses on global governance, and the other one was on gender and the politics of development. So I took those opportunities with open hands because I needed a source of income. I needed to pay rent, I needed to eat, and I needed to buy all sorts of things for my PhD because my funding was only for tuition, for fees. I didn't have a big scholarship. So I go into that space. I start being a teaching assistant. And I was so interested that as a teaching assistant, I attended all lectures for both courses. And I would be making notes. And then obviously I would give guidance to the tutors that we had recruited on how to unpack concepts further to students in tutorial spaces. And I just thought I was doing this because it made my job easier. And then there were times of crisis during the courses. Let's say a guest lecturer could not come. And I was like to the course convener, well, I'm here. Let me teach the topic. Let me just do it. It's the International Criminal Court and African perspectives on it, right? I took it on. And that was the first time that I lectured in a whole lecture space. Students gave very good feedback. Some of them even wrote to me, and I'm like, oh, okay, that was nice. And then when the COVID era started in March 2020, I think I was in a position whereby, because I had started a YouTube channel, I love talking, and I didn't know that I love teaching that much. We had to shift to create remote learning models, and that involved me creating lecture recordings and then being asked to take over some aspects of courses. I remember there was a course where I taught a section on women and the state. And then I remembered my passion for the role of women in politics, for the role of women in international relations, to think about the interactions between the feminist movement and political bodies. So I became a guest lecturer. I was like, okay, that's a fluke. The person who was supposed to do it couldn't do it. Then, as usual, as a teaching assistant, you are assisting the lecturer. So when they're in crisis mode, you help, right? And all of this was mostly unpaid. Now, there came a time when a bigger crisis was at hand, where a person who was supposed to take a whole 12-week course got sick. And they were like, you know the content. You've attended all the lectures and you've managed this course, at least the admin part and working with tutors and whatnot. Can you teach for the whole semester? Number one, I want to be finishing my PhD. And number two, I don't want to be a lecturer, right? So then I was like, okay, but the money will be helpful, right? Because I had, a preference to work for money as opposed to running my business to earn a living, because my business is even more precarious than being employed on a part-time basis. I'm a proofreader and an editor. So then, yeah, and jobs come and go. Sometimes there's no people that want you to edit or proofread their work. And so I took up the challenge, set my PhD aside because I'm bad at multitasking. I taught. And I was like, I could do this for life. I feel like I belong, right? But there was this imposter syndrome that kept coming to me because I was like, are you really sure? This is online learning, right? You've got a YouTube channel, so you are good at speaking online, right? But there's so many aspects that come with lecturing. It's about unpacking concepts, breaking down theories, and providing relevant case examples. And I was able to do that. I surprised myself a lot with a lot of concepts. So we covered a lot of, for example, institutions of global governance like the UN, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, and IMF, and so much more. And at the same time, I was like, I want to bring in the World Health Organization. Let's have discussions around the socioeconomic and political impacts of the pandemic. And I brought that into class and enabled students to engage with the present, the current, and also to look at what organizations we've been looking at from a historical perspective were doing to deal with contemporary challenges. I was in. Next thing, I was writing a paper on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic and spoke at several platforms online. And I was like, I feel like an academic, but I don't know where this is going, to be honest. And so much of my progression through to becoming who I am today was very ad hoc, although I was intentional whenever I was teaching and taking up opportunities. There was never a concerted effort to say I am shaping or building or molding someone who is going to have this pedagogical prowess. And I always loved researching and writing. And then I came to the realization that maybe lecturing should be one of my options, right, when I'm applying for jobs. But this dedication to writing, because I needed to finish my PhD, pushed me back a bit. So these times when I took a step back, pursued research jobs, which though fulfilling, kept me feeling like something was missing. And I didn't find the joy that I find when I'm teaching and working with students. And I was like, maybe it's time to listen to what has been happening to me, like in the surroundings, right? Everything is around teaching. And much of the time when I was being given opportunities, someone would just call me up and be like, can you teach? So how I became a guest lecturer today is through referrals, that's word of mouth. Someone heard about my teaching from someone I've taught with or taught for. They were like, you're the person for the job. Interviewing was merely a process of familiarizing with each other and chatting the way in terms of how are we supposed to design a course, what's the way forward, and all of that. It had nothing to do with tell me why you're the best person for the job. Same applies for some of the other opportunities. I was invited to lecture based on my LinkedIn profile. Purely, this person had heard nothing about me, no recommendations whatsoever, but they were like, I've seen what you've done and looked at some of the works that you've written on, and I think you'd be the best fit for the job. Can we have a conversation around it? Please send me your CV and then I'll recommend you to the rest of the recruitment panel. And in this case, the person that had reached out to me was the director of an institution. So I think it's also good to have a very comprehensive LinkedIn profile or a website which details the work that you've done. And if you are speaking in different platforms and also posting content that is relevant to what you've been producing as knowledge or what you've been teaching on, then people will reach out to you. However, there is always this danger, I think I've spoken about it in various videos, of there's exploitation and cheap labor in the academic sector, because we are grateful for any little opportunity. By we, I mean myself and amongst others, of course. So, in as much as I've become the person I am today, I know that I have applied for several full tenure positions and I have been unsuccessful for reasons ranging from nationality, race. I'm not too sure if gender should be factored in, and so it's a very difficult sector to enter into. And oftentimes people would want you to come into their space as a guest lecturer or as a replacement lecturer, like on an ad hoc basis, like myself, which gives you the opportunity to have something on the table in terms of food, to be able to pay rent. But then career advancement wise, there's no security. You don't know where you're going to be in the next 6 to 12 months, even though there's that kind of like hanging on to the promise that this contract might be renewed every other few months. It's not a position which encourages you to feel like you belong to the academy. But I definitely appreciate it. And I think a lot of people across the world who have been in the position of being an ad hoc lecturer can resonate with what I've been speaking about. So, if you want tips on how to become a lecturer, number one, have a desire to teach, right? And explore different opportunities. Teach by creating courses and your own platforms. I did that without realizing it, because of my research advice, proofreading, and editing service, because I provided services to people in academia. So I went over and above just proofreading and editing to giving content-based advice. And in some instances, I even have briefings and sessions with people to speak to them about their proposals, to speak to them about their thesis or dissertations. And also, being a tutor and a teaching assistant put me in positions that constantly expose me to people that are course conveners or lecturers. So there were trickle-down effects based on working with these people. I was able to gain particular skills. And I was also proactive in the sense that when there were crises, for example, I would volunteer to teach, that is to lecture, and I took on opportunities that were offered to me when they came through, and also be visible, particularly online nowadays. I know it's a very shaky space. We don't know how to use TikTok or Instagram or Facebook or YouTube to leverage ourselves and monetize our skills. But just give it a try. I started off providing research and writing advice on YouTube. The next thing, I was giving the same advice to audiences in Germany, for example, as paid work because someone saw the YouTube video. So just explore various options. If you're very good at workshop type model of facilitation, then do that. If you have access to the internet and multiple, tools, make use of that. So just first of all, accept that you can teach and that you're good at it and go for it. Don't worry too much about industry salaries. You will find ways of making it, but of course, make sure that you're still working towards finding something that's more full-time, or at least develop a business model. So stay tuned, subscribe. In my next video, I'll be speaking about the business aspect of being an academic or intellectual.